It's one of the most normalized addictions in America. So normalized, in fact, that you don't even see it as one. The red and white bullseye, the clean aisles, the red carts gliding across waxed floors like you're floating through a showroom. You don't just go to Target, you go on a Target run. You film it, you romanticize it, and you post it. In fact, many Americans don't even call it Target anymore. We call it Target with the faux French accent because it feels elevated and luxurious. It's a department store with the illusion of glamour. You shop there because it feels expensive, and it kind of is. Target isn't exactly Louis Vuitton, but it's quite expensive compared to its competitors like Walmart or Dollar General or even your neighborhood store. But you like that. Americans like that because there's status in being able to afford marked up candles, $40 sundresses, and $12 oat milk lattes from the in-store Starbucks. It's consumerism with a serotonin filter. And it works because somewhere along the way, shopping at Target became a stand-in for class, for taste, and morality. And that illusion, just like the red and white bullseye, is laser focused on one goal: keeping you consuming without asking why. Let's discuss why you may want to rethink your Target addiction. There's this strange pleasure in spending more at Target because you're getting the best of both worlds. Accessibility with the prestige of designer influence. And influencer culture has only deepened this illusion. Your feed is flooded with hashtag Target hauls, clean girl vlogs, and aesthetic snapshots of neatly folded throws and minimalist kitchenware arranged under warm LED lighting. Social media has convinced people that Target is not only just a store, it's a vibe. It's a lifestyle. It's about who you become when you buy from there. But let's be clear, Target isn't necessarily better than Walmart. The products are similar. The labor conditions are similar. The environmental impact is also similar. The only difference is the branding. Target feels like a luxury while Walmart feels cheap because capitalism has trained us that poverty is shameful and anything associated with it must be avoided at all costs. Even if that means pretending like your $30 graphic tee is somehow better because it came from a store that has a Starbucks inside of it. This is the same logic that has people buying Zara, for example, instead of buying Shein, even though both are fast fashion companies with very similar, allegedly exploitative labor conditions. Both are mass produced. I wouldn't even be surprised if they were made in the same factories. But people would rather shop at Zara because they don't want to be associated with something cheap. And I feel like it's the same with the Target versus Walmart customer. It's all about optics, I'm afraid. I want to make it clear that you're not a bad person if you've ever shopped at Target. I have personally shopped at Target, though not recently. I myself have shopped there in pursuit of that luxury adjacence that they offer. Just want to be clear, this is not a call out, this is a call in. A call in for you to reflect on how brands like Target sell you a very specific kind of identity. We think of our desires as being of our own making, but our desires don't exist in a vacuum. They're often a response to social structures that are facilitated by capitalism, that tell us that we need to buy our sense of self. And when you shop at Target, you're curating a version of yourself, and that version needs to look at least upper middle class. It's a class performance, and it's one that depends on distance from poverty, distance from lowbrow aesthetics. It's about commodity fetishism, ascribing spiritual or social value to an item while ignoring the labor behind them. That candle isn't just a candle, it's a marker of taste. Now, am I saying that rich people who have a lot of money, are necessarily shopping at Target? Absolutely not. I think people who are in pursuit of that aesthetic might find themselves shopping there to buy dupes. I feel like the Target girl / Sephora girl / Starbucks girl all exist in the same industrial complex, in the same cinematic universe. I mean, they have Starbucks inside of Target for a reason. I think even they understand the customer base is essentially the same. These are brands that aggressively target to us women, and so it's very easy to fall into that loop. I think that we've all fallen into the Target / Sephora girl Starbucks girl lube at some particular point in our lives. I know I have. I understand that some people are not even shopping there necessarily with the class dynamic in mind. Maybe they're just shopping there for convenience. Because after all, these corporations act as monopolies and they price out small businesses, and they're so ubiquitous in all of our hometowns and home cities. So some people just shop there because it's close by and they can grab a couple of quick things and it's convenient for them. I get it. Convenience is a high commodity in a time-impoverished society under capitalism where we're also exhausted and overworked and underpaid. I get it. But convenience is how corporations make themselves indispensable. It's a little too convenient because the easier it is to get some things, the easier it becomes to want everything. It's kind of common knowledge that you go to Target for a couple of quick items and then you end up being lured by that tumbler cup and that pillow and that cutesy little blanket and that candle. And before you know it, you're spending at least hundreds of dollars on items that you did not even go into the store for. And so you start craving things not just because you need them, but because they're there, they're available, and they're aesthetic. A throw pillow there, a body scrub there, a coffee mug there, all that you've convinced yourself that you deserve because you've had a long work week. It's a little too easy, a little too seamless.
With big tech and hyper-consumerism and individualism and this culture of convenience, nothing is gonna teach you organically that good things come to those who wait. Here in the States, you have everything at the tip of a finger. And that is a problem in a lot of ways, because even if people aren't intellectualizing it themselves, they're moving through the world expecting to get done quite literally today. Like, that is the point of all the innovation of capitalism being about increasing your level of convenience. You and your friends leaving the function 20, 30 years ago, you just have to wait for a taxi to come down the block. Now you could just hail an Uber. You're hungry, want a meal from your favorite restaurant, but you don't feel like putting on good clothes, going outside, having to go to get it for takeout, or sit and dine, so you just order it and have it delivered to you. You forgot to grocery shop this week, but you know that you have plans, so you're not gonna be able to do it, so you get somebody to deliver your groceries. Even the fact that we are using an internet this fast, like I remember dial-up, that is actively shaping the way people not only perceive time, but the future. And it wasn't until I got into my adulthood, specifically my mid-20s, that I started to understand why my mother was like, yeah, I crochet, I tend plants, I do things that take months, weeks, years to see the end to, because it keeps me hopeful. Americans are not used to having to wait for the good outcomes. So it makes people very ineffective political agents. I saw this happen a ton of times. People get incensed by like a Supreme Court decision or a law or some horrific case that comes out of a state. You get a ton of volunteers, a slew of people signing up to be clinic escorts, a ton of endowments and fundraising. And in about 3 months' time, no one's there because the world they wish to build can't be built in 3 months' time. And people don't know how to reconcile with that because there's nowhere in their life where they are delaying their gratification.
And once you're in that cycle, once that red card becomes your therapy, it gets harder to see the bigger picture. But while Target keeps you coming back with soft lighting and clean girl essentials, it's also making loud strategic decisions about who it actually stands with. In the summer of 2020, during the George Floyd uprisings, suddenly every corporation in America remembered that Black people existed, and more to the point, racism existed. And Target was no different. They pledged to invest in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs to hire more Black talent, and to stock more Black-owned brands. Now fast forward to 2025, and that pledge has ended, just as the political tides shifted. Because, in 2020, it was cute and trendy to try to appear to be progressive. The Black squares were the moment. But now, as our political climate is regressing, Target is sending us a signal that they are in line with that. No more DEI goals, no more third-party equity indexes, done just like that. They made it a point to announce it. And it's important to note that these goals were never made to be permanent. They were announced as being bound to 3 or 4 years, and so they were going to expire. But why make the big announcement about it? Why not just let these initiatives quietly expire? It was a signal. It was a wink and a nod to the reactionary backlash that's currently swelling in our current political climate. It was a calculated measure to align themselves with the growing Overton window, where DEI is a dirty word, where honestly it's being used as a slur. Let's keep it 100. This rollback is coming on the heels of the aggressive dismantling of federal DEI programs, executive orders banning diversity training, attacks on so-called woke institutions, the complete erasure of any programs that hint at racial justice, framing them as radical and wasteful. But as a private company, Target wasn't legally obligated to make these changes. They chose to, and they wanted you to know. And it's not just Target following this federal shift. A lot of other major corporations have also announced that they're walking back their DEI programs. Target didn't resist the climate, they folded into it and they are participating in it. Perhaps to avoid political backlash or to avoid alienating potential funders, but definitely to signal what they value and who they value as an organization. Let's be honest for just 1 minute. DEI was never going to save us. It was always a corporate-friendly response to decades, or quite frankly, centuries of anti-Black violence and racial disenfranchisement economically. In theory, DEI was about creating inclusive workspaces, but in practice, they became PR tools, often managed by overworked Black employees who were doing damage control, where the organizations had no real intention of radically changing on a structural level. Oftentimes, DEI programs were just plain virtue signaling. Let's just keep it 100. A lot of Black workers that are hired under organizations that have DEI initiatives often find themselves tokenized, underpaid, undervalued, and stuck doing symbolic work with no real lasting power, including myself. I personally worked at an organization that plastered their DEI initiatives across the homepage of their website, only to enter into a workplace that was majority white, that had only white people in senior leadership. There were no Black or brown people in positions of power or leadership. Not that that's necessarily always going to be the panacea. The workplace itself was ran on a top-down structure. And so I'll be the first to tell you that representation without transformation is just optics. And even if hiring more Black talent was a part of those DEI initiatives, simply creating Black jobs is not inherently liberatory either, because what is the quality of those jobs? Are they stuck doing menial labor? What is the pay of those jobs? Simply having a job does not mean that you are doing well in life, or that you are stable in life, or that you have a particularly high quality of life. So DEI programs were never revolutionary. It's a mechanism that allows a lot of companies to appear progressive while maintaining the status quo. It's just window dressing. Now, as far as Target's history with race goes, in 2006, they settled a lawsuit paying $775,000 involving racial harassment at its Springfield, Pennsylvania store. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC, charged that Target created and condoned a racially hostile work environment for Black employees. In 2018, Target agreed to pay $3.74 million to settle a lawsuit alleging that its use of criminal background checks disproportionately excluded Black and Hispanic applicants. The lawsuit claimed that Target's practices violated Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by disqualifying candidates for convictions unrelated to the job roles that they sought. Now, of course, this was before their 2020 DEI pledge, so surely since then, Target became a more inclusive environment. There are allegations that say otherwise. In 2021, a video showing 3 Black teenage boys being detained by police after being falsely accused of shoplifting by Target employees went viral. The boys say that they were manhandled and thrown in handcuffs while the police berated them for a crime that they did not in fact commit. In 2022, a Black woman reported that after being repeatedly rejected for a job at Target under her real name, she applied again using a different, more white-sounding name and identified as mixed race, which led to a job interview offer. In late 2023, a Black woman who was a former Target employee filed a lawsuit alleging severe racial discrimination, retaliation, and a hostile work environment during her employment at a Pikesville, Maryland store. This case appears to still be ongoing. And in 2024, even Target's haphazard attempt to promote diversity in this Black history-themed magnet learning activity that they sold in stores nationwide was riddled with errors that could have easily been corrected had Target's production teams shown a modicum of care or attention to detail.
So I went to get my kids this little magnet learning activity since Black History coming up from Target. I don't know who's in charge of Target, but these need to be pulled off the shelves like immediately. So I teach U.S. history, I study history, got my major in social studies, and I noticed some discrepancies like as soon as I open this. Like I said, these need to be pulled off the shelf. For starters, this is not Carter G. Woodson. This is W.B. Du Bois. Peep the stash. Peep the stash. They got the name wrong. This is not W.E.B. Du Bois. This is Booker T. Washington. Peep the little fancy bow tie. Peep the fancy little bow tie. And then this is not Booker T. Washington. This is Carter Woodson. You could see clearly the similarities.
You have to imagine that this went through several production teams. Target doesn't just put things on the shelf. It's gonna have to be approved by many people. And yet this still made it to the shelves, though again, rife with obvious and easily correctable mistakes. This ultimately shows how little care Target has, even on the most basic level, for Black people or Black history. Because could you imagine if they had a learning activity that had George Washington pictured as Abraham Lincoln, that had Benjamin Franklin pictured as Christopher Columbus? I bet they would have showed a lot more care and dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's before that went on shelves if it were a learning activity that was honoring white male colonial figures in history. I don't know, just a thought. Target's decision to end their DEI programs led to widespread backlash and a boycott campaign. And according to Forbes, foot traffic in Target stores declined for 8 consecutive weeks following the announcement that they were divesting from their DEI programs, with a 5.7% year-over-year drop in the week beginning March 17th of 2025. And so this decline shows the immediate impact of consumer boycotts. And I think that Target is a really easy store to boycott because they're so overpriced, and there's so many other stores that sell similar or the same merchandise for much cheaper. I've made it clear before that I understand that not everyone can boycott everything, especially, like I said earlier, knowing that corporations price out smaller businesses and more sustainable, more ethical alternatives, and they become monopolies. But when it comes to Target, I don't know that that really applies because there are much better alternatives, cheaper in some cases, or just plain more sustainable. But the durability of these boycotts has already been questionable. The announcement of a collaboration between Target and Kate Spade that's set to launch on April 12th has already led to some people reconsidering their boycott. People on social media right now are being so easily gooped and gagged by this, quite frankly, mid-looking collaboration. Like this user on Threads who wrote, "Target has a Kate Spade collab coming out on April 12th. I'm afraid this ends my boycott." The quick switch up though for this subpar ass collab shows how fickle so many Americans are when it comes to boycotting. And it's really emblematic of the conflation of personal identity with consumerism. And I think this phenomenon is on full display when anyone who criticizes the conflation of girlhood or womanhood with consumerism, with shopping addictions, is immediately branded as being sexist or hating on women's hobbies. And apparently even pick-me's, y'all are deeply unserious. The fact that anyone who suggests maybe we don't want to conflate femininity or womanhood or girlhood with shopping addictions with consumer capitalism, maybe there's a problem in that. Maybe we need to find more depth in our lives. Maybe we should allow women to be more than just people who are obsessed with shopping, who diamonds are our best friends. Whenever this is brought up, it's met with vitriol because it's hating on women's hobbies. And yeah, this is really speaking to the fact that a lot of y'all cannot see your identity outside of shopping, outside of consumerism. And this deeply unserious, quite frankly, and depoliticized defense of identity, it ultimately serves capitalism more than it ever will serve women. These critiques aren't shaming people for enjoying things. It's about challenging how society has placed so much emphasis on enjoyment by way of consumption. Like that is the only way you can enjoy yourself is through consumption. While some women in the US and global north as a whole gleefully center their femininity around retail therapy, women in the global south The very women producing many of the goods that are stocked at Target, at Shein, Zara, etc., they are working through dehumanizing, horrific working conditions with very little pay. What about letting them enjoy things? Their lives are ignored in the name of letting women enjoy things. And so the freedom to consume for some women is predicated on the systemic oppression of other women, far more marginalized women. That shouldn't be the case. The conflation of shopping with the female identity is inherently patriarchal and misogynistic itself. It's a carefully manufactured system that's designed to keep women chasing unattainable standards. A man can throw on a basic t-shirt and jeans and still be seen as presentable, as an eligible bachelor, still be seen as put together. Meanwhile, women are expected to forever have flawless skin and buy their way into that. And the latest and greatest clothing that's trending on TikTok and buy their way into that. We always have to be looking our best. The latest and greatest jewelry, purses, bags, you name it. That's uniquely pushed on women. The obsession with self that is pushed on women, the inability to just allow us to be, is anti-feminist. When we have to buy our way into womanhood constantly, every week, every day, that comes with a hefty price tag, and that's one that a lot of Black and brown women who are paid the least will simply not be able to afford to keep up with. And as such, liberation for the marginalized can never be fully achieved under the frameworks of capitalism. If consumerism is your identity, collective liberation will always take a backseat to aesthetics. And I've talked about this recently, the current wave of boycotts with trends like underconsumption core, for example. A lot of the boycotts are unfortunately being reduced to simply just being trends. Abstaining from certain brands just becomes a moment to be in and to be cool and to be trendy online, and not one that's actually rooted in an ideological commitment. That's why the Kate Spade and Target collab can so easily upend months of boycotting. Because unfortunately for a lot of people, boycotting was never rooted in a political framework. It was just rooted in being in for this moment. And this speaks volumes to American culture. We live in a society where comfort is king, where ethical actions are only pursued if they don't involve sacrifice, if they don't disrupt comfort. But boycotts were never necessarily meant to be comfortable, as I've spoken before on this channel about. They're not meant to be aesthetic lifestyle swaps. They are political refusals that require consistency, that require discipline and a vision for something beyond consumer gratification. What we're witnessing is a country that is so embedded and entrenched in commodity fetishism that any attempt to genuinely boycott and resist is going to be undermined by the next aesthetic product drop. This collaboration with Kate Spade and Target, it's a test to how little it takes to sway people away from collective action. Based on a lot of the online responses and discourse, the bar is not just low, it is subterranean, babes. And this is why we cannot allow our identities to be dictated by brands. They're not symbols of our identities or our communities. Ultimately, corporations are profit machines. And when our convictions can be so easily overturned by a tote bag or a limited edition colorway, we have to ask, did we ever have convictions at all, or were we just participating in a trend? Boycotts that are not rooted in class solidarity and a deep understanding of labor exploitation and social justice and capitalist oppression will always fail. We have to move past trendy abstinence and actually move toward ideological commitments, collective action. We need to support worker organizing, demand fair wages, and stop glamorizing brands that exploit workers while dangling diversity as a distraction. And so despite my qualms with DEI, the rollback still signifies a cultural regression and Target's alignment with that. I think that boycotting Target as a form of resistance, not just for their performative DEI stances, but more importantly, against their deeper alignment with structures that uphold systemic racism and labor exploitation, I think that's good enough reason. It should also be bigger than just boycotting Target, because some people are like, boycott Target and go to Costco. Boycott one corporation to go to another? The math is not mathing. I think there should be an ideological resistance towards shopping at multinational corporations as a whole. As the late, great Cedric Robinson wrote, capitalism is not colorblind. It is racial to its core. Racial hierarchies are not an aberration of capitalism. They are a requirement for its survival. Okay, when we go back to slavery, enslaved folks were a form of capital. And that enslaved and plantation owner dichotomy is still alive and well today. And Cedric Robinson called this racial capitalism, a system where, quote, the development, organization, and expansion of capitalist society pursued essentially racial directions. As a material force, racialism would inevitably permeate the social structures emergent from capitalism. Translation, capitalism needs racism to function. It always has. And it shows up in the low wage work that Black and brown people disproportionately perform. In 2023, Black women working full-time year-round earned 69.8% of what white non-Hispanic men earned, and non-Black Hispanic women earned 64.6% of what white men earn. A majority of domestic workers are Black, Hispanic, or Asian women, and more than a quarter, 26.6%, are Hispanic women, and nearly 1 in 5 are Black women. Most house cleaners are Hispanic women, 59.4%, and more than a quarter of agency-based home care aides are Black women. And these professions are all, of course, notoriously lower wage. Black Americans are significantly more likely to hold essential worker positions such as bus drivers and personal care aides and food service workers. And not to mention, the US relies on cheaply importing and often plundering resources of people of color in the global South, from cobalt and coltan in the Congo to fruits in Central and South America to clothing that's stitched by women in Bangladesh, etc. And so the concept of racial capitalism shows us how capitalism exploits racial divisions to sustain economic hierarchies. By systematically channeling Black and brown workers into low-wage essential roles, it's creating a permanent underclass to perform vital, because it's important to note this is vital, highly skilled labor, but it's undervalued, both socially and economically. And this stratification dictates your access to education, your access to employment opportunities, and your access to, of course, equitable pay. And this is why so many marginalized groups stay in a cycle of poverty, because they're fulfilling the capitalist demand for inexpensive labor. Any gains that are not rooted in a material class analysis under capitalism, they're always going to be temporary, symbolic, and revocable. If creating a space for diversity, equity, and inclusion of marginalized people, a genuine, authentic space that is actually liberatory, has a time limit and can be walked back at any time, it's not a win. It was never serious in the first place. It was always going to be a purely superficial way to capitalize off of the market share of Black folks. If 1,000 Black-owned businesses were stacked on the shelves of Target tomorrow, but the workers who, whether Black, brown, white, or whatever, were the ones restocking these products and still being paid $15 an hour and overworked and doing backbreaking work with no union protection, that is not liberation. Nope. That's a cosmetic change. That's capitalism wearing a dashiki, but it's not liberatory. Okay. Instead of performing diversity within hierarchical frameworks, companies should be investing in co-ops and worker-run organizations where employees, not CEOs who are mostly white men, make decisions and share profits. Supporting reparations, wealth redistribution, guaranteeing living wages, universal access to healthcare. These are just a few things we can do to create diverse and truly equitable and inclusive workplaces. Now, as far as boycotts go, boycotts, if they mean anything, they should challenge us to build new habits, new values, and new visions for community care outside of mass retail. When a shiny new collaboration tempts you back into Target, because there'll be plenty more to come, you should ask yourself, what do I really value? Am I supporting brands that align with my values, or am I allowing brands to dictate my values? Don't let consumerism be your moral compass. You are not your tote bag. You are not your red shopping cart. And if you're looking for real liberation, you're not going to find it in aisle 5 or in aisle 6 or 7. You're not going to find it. And that is all I've got. for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on Target and their end to their DEI initiatives and the boycotts and the Kate Spade collab? I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. Have you been the Target/Sephora/Starbucks girl? I know I have. I would love to hear from you. I'm happy to say I do not support any of those organizations, and my life has been better for it. And so I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. And if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you really liked it and you want more content like this, then hit that subscribe button. And if you want to check out what I'm up to outside of YouTube, you can follow me on my social media profiles down here, as well as my Patreon, where you can support me for $1.50 a month or $5 a month. Take your pick. It helps me to keep the lights on over here. Besides all that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you all next time.